Hi, and happy holidays. This is Lawrence Krauss, and you're listening to the Origins Podcast. This holiday edition of the Origins Podcast is with one of my favorite writers, and when I met him, one of my favorite people, a remarkable, enjoyable man, Augusten Burroughs, whose memoirs have left me laughing out loud so many times, it's hard to describe how many. And I was incredibly excited to be able to meet with him. Now, we met a while ago, in fact, when the podcast was just beginning. Augusten came by Phoenix on a book tour for his then new book, Toil and Trouble, a memoir. And we sat down, we met for the first time and sat down and talked for a long time. And we've been holding on to this podcast to try and figure out the right time to release it. And I thought over this holiday period, it's a good time to do that, because it's really about wishful thinking in some ways. In spite of the fact that Augusten is a remarkable realist in certain ways, I was incredibly excited to get the new book at the time and read it in advance of publication so that I could have a chance to talk with Augusten, and discovered the book was really a memoir about his view, initiated by his mother when he was younger, that he was a witch. And I really did not know how to address that issue. And I've just re-listened to the podcast again, and I forgot how much fun it was to talk. Augusten's memoirs of his own life, he had the most dysfunctional childhood of anyone I could possibly imagine. And in spite of that, and in spite of being victimized in many occasions, he doesn't think of himself as a victim, and we talked about that at great length. He has a remarkable attitude about the world, and it's a lot of fun to talk to him because he is such a wonderful writer and has a wonderful turn of phrase as I quote various parts of his writing during the conversation. But then the rest of the conversation is really a good example of sort of science and skepticism, because it's a series of examples where Augusten feels he's presented evidence for why he's a witch, and why I present arguments for why I think it's a coincidence. And you can decide which one you like better, but it's a kind of fun, respectful back and forth, at the same time enjoyable, because he's such a wonderful human being. I really, really enjoyed this conversation, and it's kind of a fun holiday listen. We've supplemented this episode also with a special episode of Science Matters, also on wishful thinking in a way, although it relates to a bit of science that's been in the news in the last month. And so we're releasing this around Christmas Day for you to enjoy during the holidays, and shortly thereafter we're releasing the episode of Science Matters. So I hope between the two of them you'll have a lot of fun listening over the holidays. Again, hopefully you can watch this without commercials by going to Critical Mass, our Substack site, and subscribing. And paid subscribers to that can watch ad-free versions of this podcast. And if you alternatively, you can watch it on YouTube, or of course you can listen to it on any of the standard podcast listening sites. No matter how you listen to it or watch it, I hope you'll enjoy it, and I hope you'll consider supporting the Origins Podcast through the Origins Project Foundation, the nonprofit foundation that runs the podcast, the public events we run, and the travel adventures for people. And in any case, I hope you have a wonderful holiday and a great new year. Thanks. Well, Augusten Burroughs, thank you so very much for coming to join me today. It's a pleasure, sort of.
It's completely a pleasure for me, 100%.
The reason it's a pleasure for me, sort of, is that I have fallen head over heels in love with you, reading your books over the years so many times. And then you told me you're writing a new book. And you come and
I think I know what you're going to say.
and it frustrates the hell out of me
Yeah.
that I have to talk to you about this subject, which I want to talk to you about, and we'll get there.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating for me.
You know what? That's why I've written 8 memoirs first, and then this, because I was never going to write about it. Because when I was a little boy and I learned about it, my mama told me, don't you tell people about this because they're going to think you're a fool.
Or crazy.
Or crazy.
Yeah, well, I think that's... But the fact that it's equally hard for me because you've written 8 memoirs. Because I wanted, this is an origins podcast, so I wanted to start with your origins, but I know more about your origins than my origins, I think, because of 8 memoirs. And so that's the other part that makes it so difficult. There's so many goddamn things to talk about, and I want to try and hold it together, we'll see how well it does. But so what? 8. I'm glad I counted. I actually wrote down 8 memoirs, which is what I counted. So that's pretty good.
Right.
I can count.
So
up
this
to
is the
8.
9th now.
This is the 9th memoir,
which is too many for anybody.
and it's amazing that you can write the 9 memoirs.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
It's
But
a lot.
I had the pleasure of going through a number of them again, ones I hadn't read and ones I had. And they're mostly consistent,
Right?
which says they're probably somewhat accurate. Which is
well,
really,
they are. Yeah. Little things might slip and slide
of course.
here with time and things.
Yeah. But it's really impressive to me when I looked at one and said, "Oh yeah, this is a story that made it into here," but it's really pretty much the same. And I think most of us, when we remember our lives, tend to remember it differently in different days.
Well, now see, that's the thing. When I'm writing about the past, if I'm writing about the distant past. Like, I can't write about the recent past very accurately because I kind of have a terrible memory. I've always thought of that. But if I'm writing about the distant past, at first, there's nothing. I don't remember anything about being 4. Nothing. So I wait, and I've got to be at my laptop when I do this. And all I need is one thing, one little thing. And you know what? Right now, okay, I actually have a thing, oyster shell. An oyster shell that my mother had. It's an oyster shell. So she used to use clam shells as ashtrays, but she had a oyster shell with a barnacle on it. And I can remember looking at the barnacle and feeling the little ridge and thinking it looked like a volcano. So if I'm writing that. Now, I haven't thought of that probably since the day it happened. And I don't doubt that memory. I'm sure that happened. So I can go back and back and back, and it's like watching a movie. So I've got to write. I don't even think of myself as a writer. I'm a watcher. And I rewatch whatever I'm writing about, and I try to type fast enough to get it out. So
are you talking to yourself? Are you writing to tell yourself what happened?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm like, as opposed to an audience.
Yeah.
I'm never writing for an audience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think
I never, because I wouldn't be able to.
Yeah. Well, I think all of it. Well, I like when I do science, I'm doing it for myself too. And a lot of people think people are doing things to save the world or otherwise, but we tend to do things for ourselves. But in your writing, I think that's one of the reasons I like it so much, because we were talking beforehand. When I write, I tend to write like I'm talking. Like I would talk to myself to try and explain something to myself. And when I read your stuff, partly, and now I reflect, partly it's come from journals, which I assume you were writing for yourself, right, when you were younger. And so it kind of allows a person to eavesdrop into your talk to yourself, which is one of the reasons I think it's so popular. There's a bunch of other reasons, and you mentioned one yourself, which I want to get to in a minute. But so I'm trying to think, how can I talk about your life in a way which anyone couldn't get from 8 memoirs? And I thought I'd pick and choose things that I found interesting because I find them interesting.
Okay.
And hopefully they'll lead us to where I want to go, because we will get to your new book, which I know you're on tour for in any case. But first thing that's interesting is you left school after grade 4.
Right.
And that's
the last grade I completed, because I did go. I mean, I later, because back then in the old days of the 70s, there was a compulsory education law in Massachusetts which stated you had to attend school until you were 16 years old. So I repeated the 3rd grade twice. And the 4th grade was the Shutesbury Elementary School's production of Alice in Wonderland, and I was the Mock Turtle with an orange canvas mid-century modern chair cover as my shell. And that was my triumph academically. After that, I went to Amherst Regional Junior High School and didn't do well and was tested by the school psychologist, who determined that I had an IQ of 80, and she put me in a class with kids who had special needs, and they had like Down syndrome. And I loved it. That was the only good day of school that I ever had. It was the best day of school I ever had. And when I was done, I went into her office and I said, "You are a failure as a psychologist. I mean, when you talk to me, do I seem to you like someone who has an IQ of 80? Does that seem to match up? Does my personality match up to your numbers?
Wow.
You are a terrible psychologist." And she began to cry. And she said she never wanted to be a psychologist. And I said, "Okay, so that's totally inappropriate for you to be crying, right?"
Oh, wow.
And I'm never coming back. So I never went back to school. What I did was I enrolled at the University of Massachusetts in a couple courses because I knew now I would be going to court.
Oh, I see.
And sure enough, I'm in front of a judge and I'm saying, "Yes, but I'm enrolled in these courses at the University of Massachusetts and I'm only auditing them, but the professors have agreed to give me grades. So here." And she was like, "It doesn't matter. You have to go back to school." So transferred from the first 7th grade into 8th grade for a couple, month or so, and then 10th maybe for a week. And then I decided I would let the law chase after me. That was it. So I never went back there.
That thing about the psychologist is amazing, but it reminded me of something I read, which I just brought back a memory that I wasn't going to talk about, but I was blown away by the way you talked to your math teacher. The way you
the substitute teacher?
The substitute teacher. You're not a teacher.
I'm very polite. I would never be a dick. Never. I mean, and even when people are assholes to me, I will remain, I'll try to take the higher road. But in that particular case, I had this math teacher in elementary school who, bullied me. I mean, I didn't understand math, and no one ever had questions, and it was arithmetic. It's not like I'm taking, calculus. It's elementary school. It's grade school, and I still didn't get it. None of it made any sense to me. And she just was the substitute teacher, and she would always pick on me. She would call me Einstein.
Yeah.
And the kids would laugh, and so I was already bullied to begin with, and so now. And one day she wrote down this formula on chalkboard. We actually moved from our normal, this is irrelevant, but we moved from our normal little round table over to the chalkboard area of the school. This is the 70s, so it was all little groups.
Yeah.
And she wrote down a thing on the board that was, had letters in it, and like way worse than just, 5, straight line, horizontal line, 72. This was like now new things. And she said, "Would anybody like to solve this equation?" And there was nobody. And then she, said, "Why don't you try? You resident math genius." And I just looked at her like, "What did I do to you?
Yeah.
Why do you hate me so much?" But then I was distracted by the chalkboard because everything had changed. And I saw shapes right in front of the chalkboard, just right in front of it. I mean, and they were, in the air, probably, I don't know, like yay big, so 10 inches big. I don't know how big they were, but they were rotating in 3 dimensions, like rotating slowly. And there was a bunch of them, like a line of them, and they were in pale colors. And I counted the sides, so that, like the triangle, and I just counted them and went through all the shapes and counted them on my fingers, and was like 39. And I had never spoken in class before. And I felt like, wow, you know what? It's like better to like say something and be wrong than to say nothing. But I wasn't wrong. I was actually right. And she was incensed. I mean, she just got like, "How did you do that? How did you do that? I did not teach you. I have not taught the class how to do this. I did not teach you how to do that." And that was it for me. I was like, "No, you have not taught me anything, because you are not a teacher. You are the substitution for a teacher. You stand in front of the chalkboard in place of a teacher. And she gave me this look of just open-mouthed rage. I mean, I could just feel, and look, usually the kids would laugh whenever she said anything to me because I was a joke. Not now.
Yeah.
No one did. And you could just see she wanted to hit me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said something really, really strange that I just came out of me. But when I said it, it was one of those things I felt it in my bones. And I told her, you have the soul of a cashier. And she reacted as though I squirted her with an air gun.
Yeah.
Flash forward. Yeah. Many years later, my alcoholic glory, I'm an advertising asshole, the dick with the biggest cell phone before people had them. And, I decided to go out to Western Massachusetts, my old stomping ground. And I'm surprised that Wally's is still there in Northampton, Massachusetts. And of course, you can't smoke unless you drink, so I smoke. And I go in to buy cigarettes from Wally's, which I'm still blown away that it's still there. I walk in to pay for them, and there she is. She's there, ready to ring up my charges.
The cashier.
Doesn't recognize me, but I recognized her, and I was like, wow, yeah, you lived up to your...
Yeah. Well, look, that's a story in the Toil
But that's
and
an
Trouble
insignificant story to me.
Well, except it was one of the examples
that could be
used
coincidence.
To suggest. Well, yes. In fact, we'll talk about.
No.
We're going to get.
I heard what you just said.
Yeah.
And no coincidence.
We're going to talk about coincidence. We'll get there.
Yeah,
because you're an expert on coincidence. You wrote very cogently about coincidence.
But things have happened since I've written the book that I need you to tell me.
Great.
To explain.
Good. I was hoping we'd get at a certain point where you could ask me questions.
You see, I'm a strange creature in that it's not that I lack emotions. I have them. Yeah. I do. I'm human.
Yeah.
But I'm also very clinical. And I have no beliefs. In general, I don't really believe in things. I mean, I don't really, unless I know there's but even when I know a thing, I know that I'm a creature that is made out of very specific materials, so my knowledge of the thing could be completely flawed. The only thing that matters to me is the elemental truth of whatever it is, no matter what it is, everything, no matter what, the indivisible, elemental, fundamental rock bottom truth of things. And I am not prone to talking myself into something or believing in something partly because of how I was raised. My parents were my mother was mentally ill later. My father was a drunk, and they couldn't raise me. And so I didn't have any adults in my life I couldn't go and ask for help or assistance. I was on my own, And when you are on your own from a really early age, and I was also molested as a kid.
Yeah, boy, we're going to go all those places.
Well, we are. Yeah. No, but the reason I mention that is because all the adults were useless to me. Mm-hmm. So I come from a perspective where you're all fucking useless. So I have to figure it out myself, and it's inefficient to lie to yourself.
Sure.
It's not practical because you're gonna bump up against your own wall. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
So no matter how hideous something is.
That's why you're so frustrating to me, because you have the soul of a scientist in that sense.
Right.
But at the same time, a line from Richard Feynman kept coming up to me when I read this, I have to admit, which is that the easiest person to fool is yourself.
Yeah, I believe that. I totally believe that. I believe that. So, and that's why beliefs are dangerous things to have.
Sure.
And if you do have them, it's okay to have them. How can I say this? It's like a belief is like an old house. Mm-hmm. You're the caretaker of it. You can have it, until the next person comes, or until it's no longer valid. Then you got to get rid of it.
Wait, most people, that would be nice if most people did. I think
Well,
the
most
problem is
people
it's really
probably
hard to discard, for people to discard beliefs.
But I find it exciting to discard beliefs.
You see, that's
And
why you should
that's
be a
what you're
physicist.
going to have to do
That's
today.
Yeah, okay, good, because I'm going to try and help with that, but also other things, because that is exactly what being a scientist is all about, is learning how to be wrong.
Right.
And enjoy it.
Right.
And
see, I actually like to be wrong.
Well, me too.
Because it's baggage that you now have shed, and you're closer. Even if you're adrift, once you know you're wrong and you've left a belief behind, you may be in limbo, but you are now closer to the truth.
Absolutely, because it means
and that's
something
a better
new
state.
to learn. It means
right.
Because if you actually knew everything, well, it wouldn't be worthwhile. You wake up and what the hell would you do every day? And in fact, I often think when it comes to really advanced civilizations, when people talk about why we haven't been communicated with, I think at some point, if there was a sufficiently advanced civilization, they wouldn't bother communicating with anyone.
Oh, well, they would, yeah. They'd probably especially pity us.
Yeah, well, they would. I don't think they'd even care.
No.
Yeah, but, okay. You said in one book, this surprised me, and this was one of the few things I didn't trust.
Right.
Said you started reading at 24. And I know, look, but you started writing it.
Understand that I could read.
Yeah, of course you could read.
I could read, but and I read as a child. I think I read A House with a Clock in Its Walls, and I read what's that thing with the pig?
Charlotte's Web.
Right, but when my mother gave me away to her psychiatrist, it was a house filled with chaos and I mean now eccentricity in quotes, but it was a lunatic asylum.
It was definitely,
and there was no privacy. So when you think about it, in order to read, you've got to have space, time, peace, quiet.
Sure.
And I didn't have that, so reading was like a luxury that I couldn't have and didn't have. So I wrote instead.
Yeah, well, that's what amazes me, because that's what I find fascinating. You've written all of your life.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
since
from
I
a time
was tiny.
and writing without reading is a very surprising thing, because I think most writers would say the reason they became writers because they really like to read, and you love to write. Now, I surmise, as your psychiatrist,
right,
that you had this tumultuous and unpredictable life, and writing gave you some much needed order and focus that you could turn inward on, and
that's correct.
Yeah, and in fact, actually, one of the questions we're jumping way all over the place. I was going to ask you if you think writing saved your life, because later on there's this wonderful description in one of your books, which is called, I've got to remember the name.
Whatever.
Yeah, well, no, because I'm going to refer to it again in a bit, so I want to get to it. But about the time when you were an alcoholic, and you read this thing by Eisenhower, and you started to write,
right, and
you stopped drinking, and it looked to me like that it saved your life. Possible side effects. I think that's the book is in, and there's I was going to read a few paragraphs from it, because what it clearly did is it sort of focused you, and then every day you seemed to drink less and less, and you wrote more and more, and you ended up writing your first novel as a result.
Right. So I had always written in some sort of form, and then when I was living with a psychiatrist, it became a constant thing, because I was writing in a journal, so it was a physical book by hand, and that created a wall. This little 45-degree opaque wall, behind which I could hide. And writing is I was never writing with a capital W to be a writer. My mother was a writer. She was a poet, and she had not been published. And to me, I associated writing as a career with complete failure, misery, and mental illness.
Your mother was
so I was not going to write.
Yeah,
I was writing to understand, what I felt and what to do about it, and also just writing too what was going on,
to try and understand what was going on, to try and internalize, to
figure
be able to
out.
have that going. Yeah. And
so it's always been it's a natural thing. Now I think that both parents spoke in grammatically complete sentences, and that is helpful. I was always corrected.
Yes, yeah.
To whom?
Yes, there's a few places in
into
books.
which
Your
my
mother or your aunt.
always being corrected.
Yeah,
So, so, yeah, I mean, I guess that was, early on. That was just something that was ingrained.
You alluded to it, and it's possible to not know anything about you, not know you had the most dysfunctional childhood imaginable.
Kind of.
Mother who was ultimately, indeed, mentally ill, who then eventually caused you not only to spend much time with her psychiatrist, who was also crazy, but eventually gave you up to him as a legal guardian, lived in this crazy house full of real kids and adopted kids. Most of the adopted kids were also his former patients.
Current psychiatric patients,
So you were living in a house full of psychiatric patients who were basically given more or less free reign without any.
That's right.
Without any supervision.
That's right. And he did toilet bowl readings where he would scoop his turds out of the toilet.
Yeah. There's that great thing where he was looking at God, and we'll talk. When we'll talk about turds and God,
right?
Because I tend to associate those things a lot anyway.
He did Bible dips where he would open everyone did Bible.
Yeah,
dips.
The Bible dips. Well, you see, we'll talk. Yeah, I want to read.
Now the Bible dip thing is interesting because what they would do is say, basically, it's a magic 8-ball.
Yeah.
So should I go to the mall today and open the Bible, put your finger down, and God would, what you landed on, that word, was your answer from God. And that really is the magic 8-ball.
Except the 8-ball says things like yes or no, and this says a random word, and then you'd need either one of your sisters, quote unquote, or the doctor.
Yeah.
So whatever it was, it looked like, of course, it would be interpreted in terms of how they wanted to interpret whatever they wanted to do, which is great. I mean, if you're going to use it as a guide, you might as well have a reason to do exactly what you're going to do anyway.
Right.
And I think there's, I read something in the new book, and it hit me, and I'll read it. It says, "It takes extreme horror for me to feel better about my own life." Which, now that I think about it, is what people are always telling me I do for them.
Right.
So screw it. And then I thought, shit, that is the reason I'm drawn to you. And I'm wondering if it's the reason you're so damn popular, because we all have dysfunctional childhood, not at your scale, and it's so
in different
refreshing.
ways.
It's so refreshing when you feel sorry for yourself and your dysfunctional childhood to see someone whose childhood just blows yours away in dysfunctionality.
Worse. I know it is.
And I thought, I'm just one of those Augusten Burroughs groupies who just enjoys learning about how miserable
you like me, and I like elevators that swallow people whole when they reach the top as they toss their babies to the onlookers.
Yeah. And I thought, well, okay, that must, it makes us all feel better to find out how miserable other people are, I guess, at some point. Now, let's just go into your mother for a little bit, because she wasn't just mentally ill. She was fascinating as well.
She was fascinating, and she was brilliant. But there was a clear, there was Mother 1.0 and Mother 2.0. So Mother 1.0, was... there was a sadness about her. She was unhappy. She was not happy with my father. My father proposed to her by threatening suicide. So already things are, not good.
It's not a good way to begin.
Not happy. But she was brilliant.
Yeah.
And she was creative, but she was also scientifically minded. Then she became mentally ill, and it was sort of a seasonal in the fall, have a psychotic episode. Sorry, as I pulled the microphone cord around. But in little time, it just completely, it was no longer seasonal. It just took over. And her mind was basically shattered, and she had a stroke. And after she had a stroke, she never had any more psychotic episodes, which is kind of interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right? But she was awful in other ways.
She was awful, but, it's clear that there's this amazing admiration and love at some level.
Young.
Yeah. And then you're quite open about later on. I want to read it. It shocked me. You'd say, basically, I have no regrets about letting her go in the last years of my life. I
had no contact with her for the last, whatever it was.
When did she, I was trying to remember what age she just gave you to the legal guardianship
12.
of this great, of the Dr. Finch, who we now know as someone else. 12. I wrote down 12. That's good. I was good at that. Okay. Must be the cosmic thing.
Right.
But, and actually there was something, it hit me. I have to ask you. So it's a crazy house. This doctor, later on in your books, you talk about how your husband has now went to you were in Connecticut, now went to a doctor's at Yale, and Yale medicine meant a lot. And it hit me, wasn't Dr. Finch male? And I thought, it's amazing this second because you said, because you would think that Dr. Finch, as a Yale-educated doctor, would not give you the same admiration for Yale medicine that you seem to have now. I was kind of surprised by that.
I think that in the beginning, and I don't know this because I didn't know him, but I've spoken to people who did know him in the very beginning. And in the very beginning, I think when he was a young doctor, allegedly he showed promise. And he was intelligent.
Oh yeah, some of the things he said when at least.
But he was, you know what he was? He was like he was a cult leader. Yeah. Really, he really wanted to be. He really wanted a religion. He surrounded himself by low self-esteem women that were deeply devoted, and he had numerous wives.
Yeah. Did he have? It's not explicit. It looked to me like he might have affairs with many of his patients.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah. And people tithed to him, which I didn't put in the book because I just forgot about it. But everyone tithed.
Yeah, everyone tithed him. That's what he made. Okay, and that was the house you're put in, as I say, for this utterly crazy man. And not only was your mother, write poetry, sort of abandon you at some level, and full of psychotic episodes, but she also, and this we don't learn until memoir number 9.
Right.
She also told you at a young age that she was a witch and you're a witch.
Right.
And I want to get there because I think that I've said that
disturbing, I know.
Well, no, I've said that religion is child abuse.
Yeah.
Because you talk to kids about things before they are able to. These are deep concepts.
I agree with you.
And so I can't help but think that your willingness to abandon disbelief regarding witchiness is somewhat related to the fact that you were told very young that this is what you are. And we'll get to and I hate to jump to conclusions, but that's what I'm about to do. So.
Right. No, I'm with you.
Okay. Now let me just read you two things about two quotes about your mother, because one of them I think is very important. Anyway, she said, I'm not tortured or torn apart by leaving my mother. I don't feel guilty for giving her none of me, and I don't wish I could change anything that happened. Mm-hmm. I believe the only difference between my mother and mothers who kill their own kids is one really extra shitty day.
Right.
She didn't drive into a lake with me strapped to the back seat, but probably because she couldn't find her car keys.
That's right.
Okay. So that I thought that was a beautiful way of sort of reflecting your view of your mother. I mean, in there are 3 books you can read about that. But then I thought there's another aspect to her that I think must be very important when I read it. Anyway, and I could be wrong, but you say my mother has been a perpetual victim. Mm-hmm. Everything was always somebody else's fault.
That's right.
This sickened me, and I resolved to never play that role.
Right.
And I think that's so important.
Yeah.
This notion of victimhood, because you could
even if you've been victimized.
No, that's the point. Because your early life is a history of victimhood, and the canonical thing you would read today. We live in a culture of victimhood, where
unfortunately,
people that's what people gets them through the day.
Yeah.
And if anyone could say they were a victim, you could. And it seemed to me she saved you in some sense by providing herself as a foil.
She kind of did. She threw herself into the teeming water filled with sharks in a way.
Yeah.
By being a victim, so that I could see the gore that resulted in.
Because you were basically raped as a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
I mean, more or less.
Yeah, totally.
And had a relationship with this 33-year-old man who was insane and
horrible.
And people nowadays would basically say they're scarred, traumatized for life. They can't work. They can't do this. And none of, in no sense does, at least do I get the sense when you're writing that you're trying to say, I feel sorry for yourself. It's more like, well, here's a really fucking crazy life.
Well, my feeling is that the things that happen to us, the horrible things that happen, they are once a horrible thing has happened, it is unalterable. It is an unalterable fact. It is now part of you. Mm-hmm. If you were a ballet dancer and you ran the Boston Marathon on the day that the Boston Marathon was attacked and your legs were blown off, and you were a dancer, there is no sense in seeking understanding or seeking an apology.
Yeah.
Even though no one in the world would begrudge you the the search for understanding or an apology. No humane person would ever say, you who lost your legs in the Boston Marathon, how dare you want an apology, But the reality is that if you were a dancer and you lost your legs in the Boston Marathon, you have to accept now that you don't have legs. So what does that mean? What you have to do is take a fresh inventory of yourself, because now you are new. Mm-hmm. You are new now. On the surface, it may seem that you'll never dance again. But you don't know that, because Boston's pretty close to Cambridge, and Cambridge is MIT, and there might be some 24-year-old there who's invented a really cool new polymer and maybe there's a way that you can dance, and maybe it's not going to be the way you envisioned dancing, but perhaps you can dance. But you're never going to get to that. You're never going to have that meeting at MIT if you are fixated and stuck on the moment the bomb blew up and the moment your legs exploded. Yes, it's horrible. And whatever it is that's happened, yes, it's awful. But there's nothing that can alter it. So, and not only is there nothing that can alter it, whatever has happened to you has changed you. And it's been my experience that inside of every horrible thing is a good thing. Mm-hmm. Is a good thing that you have to find. Really, you kind of have to make out of the horrible thing. It can lead you. If you can no longer dance, perhaps you end up teaching. And in the process of teaching, perhaps you save somebody's life or something.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the being a victim, even though you've been victimized, has always repelled me because it's inefficient. It's just like people who say they are haunted by the past.
Well, yeah.
A lot of people can't get over the past. They say, they can't get over the bad childhood they had, the past. And if you really think about it, the past doesn't haunt us. The past is no longer here. There is no such thing. Mm-hmm. Once a thing has happened, my zipper just hit the desk. But that's gone from the world now. That moment where my zipper hit the desk no longer is part of the world. In fact, there's no evidence of it. Well, except there on the camera, there's a picture of it and there's a sound, but it's no longer a real thing. So it doesn't haunt us. What happens is maybe it's the smell of a new shampoo we bought that, reaches our limbic system and triggers a memory from high school that's traumatic, and we go back and we think about it and we get all those hormones activated and we get trapped. We haunt the past. The past doesn't haunt us. That's why so much therapy is useless and based on bogus science. Much talk therapy is useless. Going over and over and over a thing is pointless because understanding is not woven into the weft and weave of the universe. Mm-hmm. It's impossible to understand because it's impossible to know what the other person was thinking, and there's just so many variables. And then if you did understand it, what good is it to have understanding? It doesn't change whatever it is that's happened.
Well, look, this is your review on therapy. Did you ever do therapy? Were you ever forced to do it?
Yeah, I've been in, and it's not been helpful.
Now, the interesting, I've had a long discussion. The one aspect
most
of therapy,
things you can fix yourself. Now, I want to say, there's some things you can't.
Yeah.
Like if you've got borderline personality disorder, you need to be in therapy. There's some things, therapy is very useful for.
Yeah.
So I don't want to dismiss therapy. Some people need it, and it's absolutely useful for some people. You've got to realize that it's a product, and you've got to go in there with a specific goal in mind. I want to not be this way. Uh-huh. So you, therapist, I'm going to give you this money, and you are going to motherfucking fix it. And if you can't do it, then you need to, You also have when you go to therapy, you got to understand it's a business, and they want to keep you there.
Yeah, sure.
Repeat business is always good for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of someone remaining sick.
So you got to always, you can't go into therapy hoping it'll fix you.
Do you think, now it just occurred to me as you're talking, that attitude towards therapy, of course, I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier, is you were observing a therapist Dr. quote unquote Finch.
Oh, yeah.
So you were observing it and observing him have patients for an extremely long time. And I don't know. I mean, I can't presume whether the goal was to cure them or to keep them tithing. And
yeah.
Did that impact?
Oh, probably. But I think the thing that had the most impact was really being on my own and realizing that I have to solve my own problems. And when I realized I was going to live in this house, that it was not just for a day or two or a week, but that it was like my new permanent life.
Yeah.
There was a period where I felt I was going to die. Not that I was going to kill myself, but I felt like little kids need their mothers. Yeah. So don't you I just kind of assumed that I would die, like a heart attack or something, And the more I thought about it, I thought about it a lot, and I thought, back when we took a trip to Mexico when I was a kid, I was 5, my mother, her best friend's kid who was my age, he got lost on the streets. We eventually found him. But I was thinking, once I was living in this house for good, I was thinking, if that had been me, and I hadn't been found, and I was 5, would I die? Without my mother, no father, and I thought, well, probably could find someone down there in Mexico that would, if not love me, at least put up with me. Maybe I'd do work for them and they'd take care of me. But if I didn't find them, I could have crawled around, found food. People were wasteful. I could have found food, in dumpsters and things. And it's hot, so I'm not going to freeze to death. And I realized it would have really sucked, but I wouldn't have died. And that's when I kind of had the epiphany that parents are really a luxury. You don't really need them. I mean, after a certain point, once you can walk and think, you don't need them. It's better if you have them, I think, probably.
It depends. I think it depends on the parents.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, if you've got a good one. If you have one parent who is good and loves you, and that doesn't mean buying you the coolest clothes. It just means that that's great. If you've got 2, that's parent lotto. But if you have none, it does not doom you.
Yeah, it doesn't doom you, and it's interesting. It's funny because...
and it's more upsetting to people who have parents.
I resonate because when I think about, when I asked you about your mother as foil for victimhood, when I grew up, my mother was a foil for me. I looked at the things she did and said, I don't want to be that way. And she was very useful, not by training me to the way I should be, but by behaving exactly the opposite way of the way I wanted to be. And then similarly, I guess for me, when just around the time my parents got divorced and there were huge fights, I suddenly realized, they're kind of just adults having troubles, and I happen to live in the same house as them, but that's sort of an accident of circumstances. But it sort of totally changed my view towards them as parents.
Right.
When I saw them as just human beings that were
incredibly incredible
flawed.
moment.
Yeah.
When you see your parents as people.
Yeah. And my mother won't be listening to this, so I can talk about it. But one thing did come up with therapy, actually, when you brought it up, that came to my mind when I was reading the Toil and Trouble book, which is about the fact that you're a witch, in case I haven't said it,
right,
or that you think you are,
right,
which is more accurate in my opinion,
right.
But
no, that I am. Yeah. You're going to change your mind.
You're going to change me, sure.
It's the word is problematic.
Yeah.
No, the definition of the word.
Yeah, no, well, we'll go into. There's a lot of different definitions of witch here that I found fascinating, and in hour 5 we'll get to them.
Yeah.
But So there's that. But now where was it? Now my mind has gone about what I was going to hit you with. The therapy thing.
Right.
Because one of the people I've talked to is Elizabeth Loftus, who's a very well-known psychologist who played a key role in this. You may remember this era of these recovered memories, where therapists were telling these kids
Yeah.
that their parents had did weird sexual things to them and their parents were put in jail, and it was all being input by therapists.
Yeah.
But
I would be immune to that.
Would you? Because when I read some of the memories,
Right.
I can't help wonder, in terms of, I'll put it in the most blunt terms, in terms of the damaged childhood of being told you're a witch.
Right.
I often wonder whether you view the memories in that kaleidoscope and say, okay, I remember it in that context,
Sure.
but it wasn't as amazing as it really seemed to be after the fact.
You know what? For the answer to that is that no, my memories are accurate, but I'm perfectly fine dismissing every example in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll say that
I can count to 26.
We'll say that every single thing that I remember in the book, we'll just say for argument's sake, is completely incorrect, and we'll only discuss which in the context of things that have happened since I've written the book.
Okay.
Where my memory is not only more accurate and fresher, but they're witnesses.
Okay. Good. Okay,
and,
we'll get this.
And film.
Yeah, no, okay. So just so you know, I don't want to dismiss at all, but I want to reflect on it because the book, look, it's like, to make it clear, it's fascinating. It is like all your books, it's a fascinating memoir of remarkable experiences. And these experiences
but you see, here's the thing too, that it's I wouldn't believe it either. Mm-hmm. And that's why I didn't write it, because I don't want people picturing me in a velvet cloak burning sage.
Yeah, sure. And if you don't mind, there, and in a little bit when we talk about witches, you wrote me a note when you first warned me about the book.
Right.
Do you mind if I read it?
No, go ahead.
Okay, we'll get there. But I want to. But I don't want to leave your father untouched.
Okay.
Okay, because this is a kind of therapy session. So,
right.
So we hit on your mother, who was a foil, but also an example because she's creative. Her good qualities were an example. Her bad qualities help you avoid them. And you really kind of get the sense of that when you read about it. Your father, however, as far as I can see, was universally negative.
He was useless.
And I love this description. It's in Running with Scissors. Which I read. It says, my father was otherwise occupied in his role of highly functional alcoholic professor of mathematics at the University of Massachusetts. And he's actually philosophy, but it's in the book. It says,
legal.
Oh, okay. Legal. Okay. So there would be, okay.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Sorry, but okay. Anyway, he had psoriasis that covered his entire body and gave him the appearance of a dried mackerel that could stand upright and wear tweed.
Right.
And he had the loving, affectionate, and outgoing personality of petrified wood.
Yeah.
I thought that was just a great... And so, as far as I could tell, I've never in any of the books seen an example that... he was never anything but that, right?
So my father was very, very frustrating to me because as a young child, he was very serious and sort of always grading papers. And I remember asking him what philosophy was. And he would never give me a definition. He would, I was too young to understand. So at some point, I had a lot of questions. And at one point, I asked him about the universe. And we were at the kitchen sink. And he drew a bubble of the universe. And he said, well, it's not the galaxy here. It's that there's many other galaxies, and that they... I suppose now they believe it's expanding. And I said, and it was like he drew a bubble like you would a talk bubble.
Uh-huh.
And I pointed to the space above the talk bubble and I said, what's that? And he said, well, that's just nothing. That's just a paper. And I said, no, but I mean, if that's the universe, what's that right there above it? Well, nothing. And I said, but what is nothing? Well, son, nothing is nothing. And I said, but what is nothing? I didn't believe in nothing. So
nothing's really close to my heart. So it shut the whole conversation down. Instead of trying to get you thinking.
Instead of trying to get me thinking about what nothing was. It was just.
Don't bother me. This is the answer. And
so I was left with questions all my life and left on my own to try to figure them out. Because I'm uncomfortable in so many ways. I'm uncomfortable physically all the time, but I'm uncomfortable mentally all the time, much more. Because of and it's been, since childhood. I loved watches. I loved digital watches, LCD. Yeah. But I was also pretty alarmed by watches because
forgive the pun.
What are the? Oh, right. I see. I didn't. Okay. That's why I was bad at tests. I don't get things like that. Because what are they? What are they keeping track of? Like, what is it? Like, I get that. Yeah. Okay, it's from 1 o'clock and now it's 2 o'clock, but that's us naming a thing. What is the thing? Like, what is it?
What is time?
What is it? Like, where is it? What's manufactured? So it seems like, and trying to understand what it is and why there's always more of it, and then where like it's gone. Oh, what? Look, there's another chunk. We get to be here to go. There's another chunk. It never stops coming at us. And it reminds me of being in advertising years ago when I was at the Charleston Shoe Factory in Boston. And Charleston shoes are made on really, really old machines, custom made for the manufacturing of Charleston shoes. So the thick latex-like formula is extruded onto a moving conveyor belt, on either side of which are dual razor blades that, as the goo passes along the belt, the blades cut away the excess. So the process of creating a Charleston shoe leaves residual matter dangling over the sides. And that's like, is that what time is? Is it just because, like, if the universe is expanding, is it, that's what, when we get more time? Is it like Charleston shoe residual? I mean, what the fuck is it?
Oh, we're gonna get there.
Okay,
because I
hope this solves things for me today. I really do.
We were gonna. I want to after I've eviscerated you. I want to allow you the chance to chat with me, because I know you have lots of questions, because you're fascinated by science, and as I say, you in many ways you have a scientific spirit. I wondered as I look at your parents, and so your father is this universal piece of wood who is no use to you.
Well, he wasn't very curious, which was really disappointing to me. He was just not a curious man.
Which is interesting. You'd think an academic would be
curious. And it was just such a disappointment.
Whereas your mother was a curious person.
Very.
Exactly. And as a role model, and you're a curious person. I'm wondering whether, though, that, because I read that, and I also read about your brother, who's a little older, who was also very sort of down-to-earth, mechanical, scientific, and you said but you also said in I think Writing with Scissors, my brother was hopelessly without style or any sense of what was going on in the world culturally. Ask him who Deborah Winger was, and he'd say, "Is she another one of those freakish Finches?" But ask him to explain how a particle accelerator worked, and he could talk uninterrupted for hours. He could even draw you a diagram with his mechanical pencil. It pained me. And I'm just wondering whether there are other foils in another way. They represent this sort of straightforward, reason, rational, academic view of the world. And they were people that you didn't view as role models. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering whether they were foils for you in just as much as your other mother was. And in saying, I want to dispense with the organized, academic, rational, reasoned world.
No, I actually loved going to the university. Mm-hmm. I loved my father's peers.
Ah, interesting.
His peers were very warm, and I loved then, as I do now, the environment of a campus. I find it very comforting. Mm-hmm. My brother was, and we don't have a relationship now. He, was...
He's 7 years older or something like that? Yeah.
7 years older, autistic.
But you say you're on the edge of autism. At least you've written that.
I mean, I've been, something, something. So what I wanted to dispense with was not the logical thinking. It was the lack of camaraderie, the lack of a brother. There was no like, I have had much more affection for early ThinkPads than I did with my brother ever. I still remember one of my first ThinkPads, and I just love that thing. And, I never had that feeling for him, and I know he never really had it for me.
Oh, interesting.
So we're similar in that way, I think. And I'm actually similar to my father, just,
Well, it's hard for me to imagine that. But.
Well, he could be logical, but he was very contained, not curious,
but contained.
But he was logical, but he was not. But he was contained.
Well, okay. Well, it's interesting that I was wrong about that then. But it's also interesting, it seemed to me, if I try and relate to the current book, that your brother was this sort of analytical, at least as far as I can tell, analytical, mechanical, scientific, and
very mechanical.
And
soldering.
But at the same time, when your mother told you were a witch,
right?
It made quite clear early on that your brother wasn't a witch,
right?
And I'm trying to ask myself, when your mother told you were a witch, and you want to be a witch because your mother, and because there's a lot of neat things.
I didn't.
Well, hold on. There's a lot of neat things about being a witch. It's exciting. You weren't Samantha, as you talked about, you couldn't wiggle your nose, but there are lots of. But the idea of being able to make things happen, it's got to be very exciting for anyone. And I'm wondering, so whether the fact that when she told you your brother isn't a witch, that was added further alert to the fact that she was and you were, that the creative, artistic side of you was tied in some ways to witchiness. It's just a question.
No, I think it was because the reason that she called me a witch was because something very specific occurred that had never occurred with her first son.
Okay.
There had never been an occurrence with him, and until that day when I was 8, not with me either. So she really thought. Now
the occurrence was, by the way, for people, your grandmother. You saw her.
So I was
on a school bus. You probably tell better than me.
Well, I liked the hump seat on the school bus, and I was prone to, and still am prone to, staring at a shape or out a car, just staring and at nothing, and I will have not a thought in my head. And in fact, when I'm backstage, often I'll get snapped out of my nothing empty-headedness by someone saying, "Sorry to disturb you. You look so deep in thought." And I sort of inwardly laugh because it's like, I literally do not have a thought in my head. I'm not thinking anything. So I was staring out the window. And we had 2 small wooden bridges. I lived on a dirt road. 2 small wooden bridges that were pretty close to each other. So, and they were small though. So, but there was a little bump. And who doesn't love a bump?
Yeah.
And on the second bump, at the moment of the second bump, I saw my grandmother's head in front of me, like an image. As right now, if I say basketball to you, do you suddenly see orange?
I'm colorblind.
Some people don't.
I see basketball.
Okay. Well, some people aren't really visual, so they don't even see basketball.
I'm pretty visual.
Most
so
people,
I do physics,
right?
Mostly pictorially.
So most people, when you suggest, if people are visual, if you suggest coffee mug, people will quickly visualize. So when I say I saw my grandmother's head, it was like that, and there was a laceration on her forehead, and it was accompanied by the knowledge that something bad, wrong. I mean, kind of like those 2 words, bad, wrong, what? The second bridge was very close to the bottom of our driveway where the driver stopped. So I ran up, rang the doorbell. My mother opened the door. She was on the phone, which was, in the prehistoric days of technology where the phone was attached to the wall with a long cord. And I said, my grandmother's name was Amma. And I was upset. And I said, something happened to Amma, something bad. What happened to Amma? What happened to Amma? And I was, really upset. And she was startled. She, continued speaking for a little bit and got off the phone pretty quickly. And she said, "What did you say?" I said, "Something bad happened to Amma." "What happened to Amma?" "How did you know this?" "I was on the bus and went over a bump and I saw her." And she said, "That was your Uncle Mercer on the phone. He's calling from the hospital. Your grandmother has been in a car accident. And she has a punctured lung and she has a scalp laceration on her forehead, but she's going to be okay. And I said, okay. I felt relief, but at the same moment, I felt scared. And I said, Mom, how did I know that? And she got this look on her face of like, I don't know, it was sort of, I guess, sort of love, but surprise and almost mischief. She could be fun. My mother could be very funny, but she was not funny, but she bent down and she said, you knew because you are my son, which wasn't really a helpful answer. She said, you know what a witch, looks like. And I was like, you mean like on The Wizard of Oz, like the horrible dumb one and the cool one who could like train monkey? I mean, well, a witch looks like your grandmother and looks like your Aunt Curtis and looks like me and looks like you. And so began my mother telling me that I had come from a long line of witches and what it meant and what it didn't mean.
What it didn't mean.
So my mother believed not in spells and incantations and herbs. My mother believed that we, and perhaps many people, contain what in some people is a dormant sensory apparatus. And that there was nothing supernatural about a witch. That a witch, it's not this, it's not that, it's not that. I remember having a dream as a child that I was floating in a room at a party, hovering.
Sure.
And trying it, and like being upset, like, why couldn't I do this? And she said, because you can't hover. A witch can't do anything that defies the laws of physics,
As she said.
But she can do many things that people believe defy the laws of physics. So it was, after horror. No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, when you say it that way, I mean, if I was a kid
right.
and I could learn that I had that opportunity, a possibility, I would be enthralled. I would be so excited.
I didn't really know what it meant. It explained some things to me about myself that I had experienced as a young kid, but never really talked about. But it was also unreliable, and it was something that I couldn't always control. Excuse me. And the part of it that seemed strongest, So one of the things my mother would talk about was creating something. And that's really the part that's debatable. And I hang on to it because I think it's useful. So my mother would talk about want for nothing.
Yeah.
We don't want for something, but through focus and pure focus, we cause a thing to occur.
Yeah.
And that resonated with me after I got over the disappointment that it didn't mean I could make a new bike appear. The idea that with pure focus and concentration, I could accomplish that which I desired to accomplish was useful.
Of course. It's useful as my mother told me, you can do anything you want.
But
you work at it, you can do anything you want. Now, it's not necessarily true, but it gave me the confidence to do that. And
now that, whether I would have achieved or obtained the things I did beneath the umbrella of being a witch or out from under the umbrella is completely open. Perhaps.
Yeah.
Perhaps
fact,
exactly.
You're open to that in the book. As I want to give some quotes where you say, well, this might happen.
Might happen anyway. All of it. Yeah. All of it.
And all of it. And
everything that I've
my
accomplished.
response, because I'm naturally skeptical, is, it might have happened anyway.
Right.
And well, I want to.
But regardless, focus though, whatever you call, that's a very good thing. And focus, pure focus, is important.
It's a wonderful.
No matter what,
yeah.
and so is understanding the thing that that you want versus the thing you wish you wanted or want to want. So all of those things are useful.
Oh, sure, and I think that's the point to me. If I'm reading this, is that there are lots of useful things that have allowed you to do things you've done, and there are other things that you interpret in certain ways, which I'm skeptical of, but the end result is the same regardless of the way you view it, I guess. And I want, well, anyway, you were going to say something.
I was going to say the part to me that is most interesting and significant is the part where I will take physical action, often illogically. I will take physical action in circumstances that don't warrant the action, only to find out later that I was reacting to something that has now occurred.
Yeah, that you did something and you didn't know the reason why you're doing it, and you refer to this a bunch of times in the book, and afterwards it turned out if you hadn't done that, something disastrous could have happened, or at least negative, or something good happened because of this action that appeared to have no relationship to what was going on. And we'll talk about some examples. I want, but what frustrates me, you see, what I love about the conversation, what I love about your attitude, but frustrates me at the same time, is that you're not like a gullible, you're a skeptical person. I want to get to that. In fact, I want to get to the next, except there's two questions I have to ask you about your origins, just because I'm interested. How many dogs have you had? I mean, it seems to me your whole life is like full of dogs.
Yeah, it has been. What a funny question. Yeah. I mean, all my life.
I count, so I mean, I counted 6 or 8.
No more than that.
Yeah, it must be.
That.
And my point is, they're also all most of them are dysfunctional.
Well,
and so I'm wondering if that's just you're enjoying their dysfunctionality, just like I'm enjoying yours.
Our dogs are never trained. We don't train them.
Yeah.
They're customized.
Yeah.
So they're all and they never fight. They get along great, but they're they're funny creatures.
Well, they're a key part of your life, and they all seem to be. Many of them started as mistakes, and then then later on they're lovely and they're a central part of your life. But you recognize them as mistakes.
I mean, we had we gave one away recently, which is something we never did. We had a Rhodesian Ridgeback that had a
the Rhodesian Ridgeback.
It had a overbite, and it would look at us with such disdain, and its Ridgeback to us became a mullet, and it would look at us. And if it could speak, that Ridgeback would have said, "I hate you." But when our friend Sherry would come over, it loved her.
Oh.
He loved her. So if I went to cuddle with him on the couch, I would get growled at.
Oh, interesting.
But so one day, Sherry was going through a rough patch, and she said, "Can I take Gunther, home for the night?" And Christopher and I didn't discuss it, and we both said, "You know what? Yeah. Keep him. Take him. Keep him." So he still visits us. He hates visiting us, but he'll put up with it. But
well, I just
but yeah, no. So
I love dogs, but it's amazing to me how many you have, and no matter how many you have, you seem to always have more.
Well, there's I got to replenish them.
Yeah,
if I could, I'd
not
have
just
more.
Replenish them, but I mean, you had 2 once, then you got a third, and then you got a fourth.
Yeah,
and I thought
never had more than 4 at once.
4 is a lot.
Never had more than 4 at once.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it really hit me. So but I did that for me, but because I digressed because I was fascinated. But I want to get back to the fact that from the moment you were young, you had a skeptical nature. And
yeah.
The greatest example, I love this, it's from Side Effects, is the reaction you had when one of your grandmothers, when you had a loose tooth when you were a kid.
Oh.
And she told you about the tooth fairy.
Carolyn.
I got to read this. And she said, the tooth fairy is a fairy like Tinkerbell? You know Tinkerbell, don't you? I did know Tinkerbell, the irritating cartoon insect. Yes, I said, I know that thing, I frowned. Well, the tooth fairy is like Tinkerbell, and whenever you lose a tooth, you place it under your pillow at night before you go to bed, and then the tooth fairy slips into your room and takes your tooth away and leaves some money in its place right there under your pillow. Real money, sweetheart, that you can spend on whatever you like.
It's Carolyn.
Huh? And you said, I was horrified.
Yeah.
I imagined that creepy bug woman with her devil wand sneaking into my bedroom at night while I was sleeping and taking my teeth and leaving things under the pillow that shouldn't be there. Cash, which my father said was very limited, and something I knew I shouldn't have. Then I have to say this one too. Then I climbed into bed and prayed to Jesus. At this point, I wasn't sure where I stood Jesus-wise. Although my parents never attended church or mentioned Jesus except when they screamed at each other, and then they used his full name, Jesus fucking Christ. They did explain that he was a man who lived in the sky and granted wishes to certain people he liked. So I prayed, Dear Jesus, please keep it out of the room. Please, I promise, I'll be honest and very nice to everybody, and I love my mother and father and brother and all my relatives here and all over in Cairo, Georgia, and I love everybody I know, and even people I don't know now, but will know someday, and I promise everything, but please keep it out of my room and away from me. Thank you, Jesus fucking Christ.
Right.
So, to me, that, captured both, because this thing that you're supposed to love, you immediately sort of thought of as skeptically, why would I want to have this thing crawl in my room? And of course, there's the religious aspect of Jesus fucking Christ. Clearly,
right.
Don't take that seriously either.
You know, it's funny because there was a period in my life where I wanted to be religious.
Yeah.
I really wanted to be religious. And I also got Santa and Jesus confused.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, you read about that.
I did. I think I did. I did write that in one because it's very, when you're a little kid.
Yeah.
You can't really tell which one's the one that sends you, gives you presents, and which one's the one that's bleeding on it.
Well, I think you said, but it's funny when you said that. A reason I remember it is because my attitude towards religion, it was very much like my attitude towards Santa Claus. When I was young, of course, I wanted to believe, and then you grow out of it. You just simply grow out of it.
Yeah.
And
it's like you can't.
Yeah.
You just can't.
Yeah, because...
and it's a disappointment.
Yeah, it is, but...
There's no big brother. There's no one going to pick you up from the mall in the sky.
And in fact, that's what's important. When you talk about being a witch, you say, at the very beginning of the book, here's a partial list of things I don't believe in.
Right.
God, the devil, heaven, hell, Bigfoot, ancient aliens, past life, life after death, vampires, zombies, Reiki, homeopathy, Rolfing, reflexology. And so it's clear you're not by nature a sort of person who falls for this stuff.
No.
And that's why the witch thing makes it even more interesting. Of course, if it fell for it naturally, it would be less interesting.
Yeah, no, right.
I
get it.
Yeah. For me, that I find that juxtaposition particularly frustrating because there's two things that I think of. One, when you talk about this, it was from the X-Files. Fox Mulder says,
"Never seen that, but
though it's not. You haven't missed
everyone
much,
says
in my
I
opinion.
should.
Well, the one part you should see is where above his desk, where he says, I want to believe."
Oh, okay.
Because we all want to believe. I mean, we're hardwired to want to believe, I think, and we want to believe those stories. And I kept in the context of the witching stories. I thought of we want to believe. That was one thing. But the other comes from a scientist. When I read you want to say something?
No, I want to say it's not that I want to believe. I want to know.
Well, that's what Carl Sagan said, by the way. He said, "I don't want to believe. I want to know."
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
You see, I told you you're a natural scientist.
I want to know.
But Richard Feynman
and witch. The thing about witch too is I like the word because it's historical and it's just. But as my husband says, it needs a new word and a PR agent, because he's Swiss. He is like, when I told him aspirin came from trees, willow, but he's like, no, it comes from a drugstore.
Yeah.
I mean, he had never experienced a coincidence until he met me.
Interesting. Well, but it shouldn't need a better PR. You were an advertising executive. You should be able to do the job, right? Maybe that's what this is, to try and give witchiness a new twist.
Well, yeah, or try to understand
twist.
What one aspect of it is.
Yeah, what one aspect, and there's so many aspects, and I want to try and get to them and then to the science, I hope. But when we talk about that particular initial experience that you had of with your grandmother, it resonated with me or hit me and my skeptical side immediately,
right?
For a variety of reasons, but specifically because of an example that Richard Feynman, who is a physicist I have always greatly admired, used. Feynman used to go up to people and say, "You won't believe what happened to me. You won't believe what happened to me." And people say, "What?" He said, "Absolutely nothing." and because he said, you can dream and you can have so many things and they're nonsense and they're nonsense and nonsense. And you dream one night that your friend is going to break their arm or be in a car accident, and you find the next day that they broke their leg and they fell off a horse, and it has significance.
The law of truly large numbers.
Well, we want everything that happens to us to be significant.
Yeah, I know that.
And I know
and we're talk
about the law. You talk it. In fact, with great authority, you read
the paper.
By mathematician I know well about law of large numbers and coincidences.
Right.
But we make those things if we have something that works. It's not just the coincidence that happen. That's not what I'm getting at. That happens. It's that when they resonate, we remember them. When they don't resonate, we don't remember them. So if you had had that experience and you went and said, "What's wrong with Anna?" And your mom said, "Oh, she's fine. I'm just talking to her on the phone right now," I wouldn't have read about it in the book.
Right.
And so the thing, my natural suspicious part is, do you pick and choose the things that work and remember them and not remember the things that don't? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that I totally understand that question. But I have a high level of self-awareness and of skepticism.
Yeah.
With respect to everything.
Everything, it seems to me, except this.
So.
Well, even this, you were skeptical about a lot.
I will give you an example.
Okay.
And this is a good example. So neither of these are in the book.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
Oh no, one of them is. One of them
okay.
is. One of them is. And it was when one day, so we lived in Battery Park City, which is very tip of Manhattan.
Yeah.
So down. And my husband worked uptown in his apartment, so he would leave in the morning for work. Now there have been periods in my life where I'm not paying any attention to the media at all. I'm in a blackout mode.
Oh yes. Okay.
So you know what I'm talking about here in this. And so it was one of those periods where I just had Turner Classic Movies on, didn't leave the house. My little, my phone, what do you call it? The Fitbit thing app on my phone had 50 steps, from taking the dog out to the front. But I, on this particular morning, just freaked out. I just was like, oh my God, we live like on an island. Like on an island. If something happens, we're going to be trapped. I need a Zodiac boat. Like, I just freaked out. So I went to the bank and I got cash, and I went into Soho and I bought, I needed like a cross-shoulder bag that was discreet where I could put, I have a lot of jewelry. I needed to be able to stash it away in there with cash. Went to the Army Navy store, got a Navy SEAL knife and a tactical flashlight, went home, packed it up to see if it all fit. It did. Then realized I should probably have a suitcase and keep it packed. So I packed a suitcase. And then went on Amazon looking for Zodiac boats and then ways to pump up a Zodiac boat if there's no power, like a foot thing. And, didn't get the job done. Christopher came home and was like, "Oh, good, you're packed." And I was like, "Oh, you bet I'm packed. I'm ready now. Bring it on." But he was looking at me like, "Okay, let's go." And I was like, "Go where?" And it was this weird sort of awkward, like, you're packed. I mean, get up, let's go. And I was like, "Go where?" And he said, have you not seen the news? Have you seen anything today? Have you heard anybody talking? And I was like, "No." And he said, "Okay, so there's a storm coming called Sandy, and there's a mandatory evacuation in Battery Park City. We have to go uptown." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I told you to forget everything in the book.
Yeah.
Let's say that I heard someone discussing Sandy in the steel. One thing I noticed living in a high-rise, when I put my head on the pillow, I could hear distant
other people.
Well, I couldn't hear anything enough to make it out words, or at least not on a conscious level.
Yeah, not a conscious level.
But let's say that's what happened.
Yeah, my thought was sometime in the day when you walk the dog,
exactly,
you might hear people going up the stairs or something.
And that I wasn't aware of
consciousness, but
let's say that subconsciously I overheard someone say it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that happened. So here's something that happened since the book. A couple things.
Okay.
So this was, I don't know, shortly after the book had been sent off to the publisher. So my office, we live in, like I mentioned, an old, 200-year-old house. It's got an attic.
Yeah.
Really cool attic everyone kind of wants that you see in movies no one ever has, right? That's my office. Floor under that, bedroom. And there's a back old stairway. So I go down that back old stairway in the morning and go through the dining room, which is a brief room, into the kitchen for coffee, which I then take up the back stairs into my office. So this was just an ordinary day. Nothing unusual about it. And as I approached the edge of the dining room table, blocking my vision suddenly was a diagonal black line. And like I described, seeing my grandmother's face.
Uh-huh.
With the knowledge that I may have trouble getting to my office. Something blocking the office. Something. So I turned around and I went upstairs, and for the second time in my life, I packed jewelry and everything of value into the black suitcase that I had actually packed clothes in before, but that's irrelevant.
Yeah.
And I took it downstairs and I put it under the dining room table. So this is the second time only that I have ever packed a suitcase for no reason. Okay. I've never packed a suitcase for the sake of packing a suitcase. Unless I have severe brain damage and have, in fact, repeatedly packed suitcases.
You don't know about it, yeah. But let's assume that's not the case.
The psychiatrist that I saw once said that people like me that he sees with this, whatever he called it, sensory processing, which is, one of those things that they, when they have the collection of symptoms that I have, tend to have memories that extend deep, deep, deep into childhood. We don't adapt the memories, that most people get rid of. Anyway, so for the second time I packed this suitcase, and I went to the living room with my coffee, and I went lengthwise on the couch. So my back was against the arm of the couch, stretched out laptop. And not long, later, and I really don't remember how long it was, but, a couple hours, I heard it was a loud enough sound that I jumped off the couch. Uh-huh. It just was like the roof falling out. I jumped off the couch, and as I did, glitter, the floor was just sparkling. I turned around, and a fucking tree branch had punched not just the window, but the frame. Now, these old houses are plaster. They're tough.
Yeah.
I mean, old chestnut is like steel.
Sure.
But there's a big branch, and it punched into the room. So I went outside, and I was like, oh, fuck. Why? Why today? But the problem is that the tree branch here is obviously not big enough. So I go around the house and I see that it had split in half because there's another half of it on the patio, but it doesn't appear to have done any damage over there. Patio is
It's fine.
Is what do you call it? That stone, some whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Old rock.
Sheetrock. No.
So I go upstairs to the attic, and I'm pleased to discover that in fact there is no vertical line, there is no branch through the attic.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, there is no hole in the attic. That's a relief.
Yeah.
However, everything that was on that side of the room, including a chair, is now on that side of the room. Which means that if I had not taken irrational action, the result would have been thousands of dollars in damaged jewelry, because the jewelry
would have shot across.
Would have shot and bounced across a wall, and that would have damaged stones. So a lot of these items were on, there's a shelf. It's over the window, which is sort of, and this, the apex of the roof, I would say the shelf is about, whatever that is, 3 feet from the apex of the roof. So it's a high shelf, and that's where the trinkets are. Everything over there, opposite side of the room. And so here's another thing that's occurred. So when reading the book, you know that we had a tornado. We had storm that damaged
a lot of problems with your trees.
That damaged. We had some damage to the fence. So the house, had a fence that's been there since the 90s, a wooden cedar fence. We repaired it, and just recently, had it finished and fixed. So now that I own a online jewelry store, I have a workshop in the basement because sometimes things need to be polished. For example, jade beads. So that it requires, I've been doing it for years. It requires, diamond paste and a certain level of skill, but it's not something that requires thought.
Okay.
But it requires very specific eye and hand stuff. So often I just daydream, or space out.
Sure, why not?
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And this was right before tour. And a truck has knocked the fence out. As I'm arriving home from somewhere, I see this tractor trailer pulling away. And I'm shouting at him, and he drives off. Fucking fence just had fixed is down. So I'm on the witness stand. And the lawyer is saying, but Mr. Burroughs, I have to ask you, is it not possible that there were in fact 2 trucks traveling in tandem on this day, and that my client was in the second truck inspecting the damage unfortunately inflicted by the first truck? Would you not acknowledge that that is a possibility? And I, in my daydream, replied, well, I don't believe it's possible for me to give you a 100% accurate answer because I'm not a mathematician or a statistician. So I will have to give you a human, non-professional answer. And what I can tell you is that A, I work from home, and B, I don't ever like to leave home, which is to say I never go to movies. I don't go shopping. We don't have things to shop at, so I go to the grocery store. So I am home more often than the average person. And I'm always aware of traffic patterns because it's so close. So in the 4 years that we've occupied the house, I've observed that between 1 and on a heavy day, 3 box trucks will travel down this road, which is a narrow road. And probably twice a month, a tractor trailer will turn off the main road and attempt to go down this narrow road and reverse. I've never seen a pair of box trucks or any trucks other than maybe pickup trucks, cars. Never seen a pair of trucks traveling on this road. Now, on the road next to it, yes. In fact, there was a period where there were regular convoys of trucks as they were assembling the power station down the road. But on this road, I've never observed a pair of trucks. So, a pair of trucks appearing on the very same day that our fence, which has been standing since 1997, is taken out, seems to me to be so improbable as to be beyond the realm. So for all intents and purposes, no, it's not actually a possibility. And I had this whole, and I was getting like all, angry about like, and then I snapped out of it and, went upstairs, went out to the grocery store for dinner and came home. And there's a fucking trailer truck parked in front of our goddamn house. And there are two cars. And I say to Christopher, stop the fucking car. That truck has taken out the fence. But it hadn't. You could see. Uh-huh. But you could only see the fence curves. And I said, no, he's taken out the fence. Quick, stop. I got out, walked over. Motherfucker had taken out the fucking fence. Uh-huh. And so I started yelling, hey, get out of the... Drove off. So called the cops. Cops came over. Making dinner later. And so we sit down. We eat in the living room like college students. Mm-hmm. Watching, whatever. Yeah. And then I remembered, I forgot to tell you. So when I was downstairs, I was working on that necklace. I just had this, fantasy thing. So I actually saw it occur, 3.5 hours before it did. And he said, or. I said, what do you mean, or? His meaning was, or I caused it. And I was like, no, I didn't cause it. But I definitely saw it. So those are two examples that have occurred since the book.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. But my and I understand your point about all the coincidences that do not bear fruit, not being mentioned
or remembered or noticed, because we all have crazy dreams or thoughts or daydreams.
But I don't believe we are all as focused on the significance or as aware of coincidences from such an early age as I am.
Yeah.
So,
but do you think that
even one that was not beneficial or did not bear fruit, I'm skeptical that I would overlook it.
Okay, because my question,
because I would love to find out that it's in fact completely meaningless. Now, here's the other thing. I'm a catastrophist, so I'm always expecting the worst possible thing to happen. And then, when it does happen, right? So how do you know? Uh-huh. And an interesting thing is that the times that I take action of some sort, even if I don't know why I'm taking the action, those seem to be the times where it's a good thing I took the action.
Yeah, no.
So what could be a possible? Now, with my grandmother, for the sake of argument, let's say, let's pretend that my memory is in fact accurate. Mm-hmm. That in fact, if we had a recording of that day, we would see a small child, an 8-year-old on a bus, reacting and upset, and let's just, for the sake of argument, say that. How is it possible that I would be aware of my grandmother's accident? And to me, it doesn't seem remotely peculiar. Because imagine our earliest days as humans. Uh-huh. When mom's in the cave with the little cubs, or the house or the little hut, right? And maybe she's got a new one in the oven, so she's kind of not too steady on her feet, and the mate is out, over in the valley there, gathering up berries and small animals and squirrels on sticks to bring home for a feast. But mom sees this very curious cat, large, not terribly friendly looking cat, circling, back and forth. Mom needs a way to text the husband, the mate, and say, you got to get your ass home. Shit's going down. And it would benefit our species if we had a way to do that.
Yeah, sure it would.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah, but just because it would benefit doesn't mean it exists.
But
some moms get eaten, and then.
But okay, but let's look at it this way. So the sounds that my dog can hear.
Yeah.
Right?
So your dog can hear things you can't. Look, I know where you're getting. I'm just because of course, I mean the book, your discussions are eminently scientific. I don't have time, unfortunately, to read the wonderful definitions of witchcraft, which are not, levitating and doing all that. It's a kind of sensing a world that's underneath the world of our senses. There's more to the world than we see, and of course that's what the science I do is all about. Well, I'm not doing justice.
No, but
if we had another hour, I would read all of your descriptions, which are very. In fact, the ones your mother gave you are particularly scientific sounding. Mm-hmm. There's energy, there's signals, and things like that. But the point is that but you also said when it talks about how it would benefit us, and somewhere I was very heartened when you said, the earth isn't flat whether you like it or not. It's just not. And just because you want something to be that way in the world, that doesn't mean it is.
Right.
And it would be great if we had that characteristic, but doesn't mean it is. And I guess, so I'm going to jump ahead and throw out you some of the reasons I'm scientifically skeptical of having this capability to do things that would just sense the structures that are going on in the world beyond our ability normally to do it, and that some people might be able to be particularly sensitive. Now, I do think, by the way, jumping ahead a little bit, that some people are particularly sensitive to cues, and I suspect, in spite of
human cues
and cues of the people around them, and in spite of the statements you make about being awkward or artistic, I suspect you're probably much more sensitive to the cues of the people around you than you imagine, and you strike.
No, I think I know that I'm very sensitive.
And I think that sensitivity, can often, you can be sensitive to things you didn't even know you were sensitive to. But part of the problem of this knowing what's happening at a distance, one of the many reasons that a scientist would be skeptical, is that there are first of all there are two properties of signaling.
Okay, good.
One is that the ability to see it goes down with distance, usually distance squared. Mm-hmm. Okay? So one of the real problems with people having remote sensing or telepathy or knowing what's going on the other side of the world is that even if such a sensitivity existed, any physical mechanism to translate a signal from one end to the other would decrease in its efficiency with distance. It would increase in its power with the square of distance, it turns out, because it would spread over time. And so one of the real problems that many of us have with the kind of some of the
that's not a good argument, because you wouldn't know the threshold for that distance.
No, but you
don't know how strong a signal would be for the neurons to be able to pick it up.
But in general, one would find to be much less efficient to know what's happening in
less
Georgia.
efficient. I may not know what she was wearing at the time of the accident.
But now we go. But let's talk about threshold.
Okay.
So the amazing thing is that we are, of course, limited in our sensory abilities, but we, as scientists, have produced devices that are amazingly sensitive.
Yes.
And for example, take the Arecibo radio telescope. I use this as an example. So if there were a light bulb on Pluto, we'd be able to, and someone turned it on, we'd be able to detect it. And so we can sense things at a level of a sensitivity that is unbelievably small that are happening at the other end of the universe.
Right.
And it is highly implausible, I'll put it that way, because in science things are either not true or false, they're either probable or not probable. It's highly, highly, highly improbable that if there was something that was produced a signal that was detectable by your brain or your body in some way, that it would evade the ability of any of our amazing devices that can sense things at not thousands, not millions, not billions, not even trillions, but many trillions of times less sensitivity than we have. And we also know that if there was some that you have to have a mechanism in physics. So if there's something, and your mother talks in terms of signals and energy, we can measure energies. We can measure these things at levels that are so much smaller than the levels that would cause the cells in your brain to have a chemical reaction and produce a thought. That if there were such things that did that, it's highly amazing to someone like me that we wouldn't have other ways of detecting it. It's just so remarkable that you'd be able to do that. And
John, a lot of things, isn't measurement something inherently difficult in your field?
And you talk about quantum mechanics in the book in an interesting way, and you say, well, if we measure something, we change it. And it's a wonderful, in fact, at the end of the book, it's a wonderful paragraph about basically just that somehow, there are mysteries. Let me read it because I loved it. And let's see, it's just before the owls. It's, I inherited from her something people say cannot be real, something that defies logic and science. It is something that cannot be measured in a laboratory. Yet in science, the closer one examines something, the more impossible it becomes to measure it. And then you say we live in a physical world where the mere act of observation alone is enough to alter that which is observed, to change it from one form to another. What is that if not magic? Is it so hard to believe what a witch can do?
Right.
So I love the intent of that.
Yes.
The problem is it's not true.
Right.
In the sense that, quantum mechanics does. When you measure things, you could change them. But the closer you look at something, it depends. The better you can measure it. There are other there are variables you can't measure as well. If I try and measure the position of an object with more and more accuracy, I'll be able to do that. I won't be able to know its momentum. I won't be able to know where it's going. So measurement is an issue, but we can measure with unbelievable precision. That I can measure. I was just talking yesterday to a group of black holes. I can measure the light from a black hole 55 million light years away.
Are we certain that distance is what we think it is? Are you certain that distance is what you think it is?
I'm trying not to be certain of anything.
Do you think that our machines, and it's like internal logic, that do we know that distance is a thing?
Well, we only know.
Really?
We can only hold on.
And it makes sense with our measurements, which we create and interpret.
You can say that everything is subjective, except it is to some extent distance is relative, as Einstein showed. But the problem is that what we do is we test that idea. We don't assume it's true. So we find many independent ways of doing things to see if they gave the same answer. So we don't trust that one distance measure in the universe is right. We make a big point of saying, let's try and find something that's totally independent that, in fact, could falsify the first observation. And that's, by the way, something else I want to talk to you about in terms of the science of what you're talking about, which is falsifiability, which is a key part of science.
Tell me what that is.
Well, it means, let me illustrate it to you by asking you this question. What could I say to convince you that you're wrong?
you could explain to me, with the recent examples, for example, why I packed a suitcase of valuables on a day that the valuables turned out to be in danger. Why did I do that?
Okay. Now, as I like to say to religious people, lack of understanding is not evidence for God.
No,
it's evidence
that's fine.
of lack of understanding.
Okay, that's fine.
So I'm willing to say I don't understand that, but then I can ask myself,
well, what might have? Because again, I think it's significant that I haven't done it.
Oh, sure. Oh,
so,
absolutely.
But what do you think might be a good?
I can give you lots of arguments. I wasn't there, and I may not have a good explanation. One is that it's not the first time a tree has hit your house. It seems to happen a lot at your house. You have big trees surrounding your house a lot, if I read the book. Mm-hmm. That's one supposition I might have. But before, instead of giving you, let me read you, because the question you're asking, when we first wrote about doing this,
right?
And I said, great, you're writing a new book. I can't wait.
I know.
And you said, and then you wrote me, and I thought, oh no. And you wrote me and said, it's about being a witch, for a long line of them, which is something I would not believe in. I don't believe in homeopathy or God or ghosts, but I know witchcraft. I know witchcraft is real. It suffers from a name issue, needs a new PR agent. I believe the thing called witchcraft and the various ways in which it's manifested in my life have a neurological basis that is not known.
Right.
Okay?
And I do
you
believe
read the book, you will either think I'm lying about everything, or you'll be forced to admit that at least some of it, if not all people, some clusters of neurons are able to receive information that would seem impossible to receive given our current map of the brain. I was surprised I wrote the book, frankly, because it's something I've never told anyone. I totally get how delusional it may appear, but I offer startling examples. It's why I've studied physics my whole life. I'm very suspicious of physical distance. Everything we observe, we do so with limited equipment. Agree with you 100%. But then I said, oh, I'm a little skeptical. And you responded, I would be totally skeptical too. I would love to have an explanation that doesn't require so many question marks.
Right.
Now, so when I thought of that, once again, I'm going to give you an example from Feynman.
Okay.
And it has to do with UFOs. I've talked to a lot of people who've told me amazing experiences with UFOs. There was a time when I used to debate UFO people. I don't do it anymore, but there was a time when I used to. And they tell me about their experiences. I saw this, and how can you explain that? And the answer is I can't.
You mean people who've
seen them or been not necessarily the ones who've been abducted, okay, but the ones who've seen them, seen amazing things in great detail, okay? How can you explain what I saw hovering among my yard, that silver object that hovered and then went down, and a bright light came and it zoomed off and came back and then
sort of neurological,
shone, and I couldn't move at the same time. No, you know what?
Neurotransmitter.
No,
screw up.
I can try and come up with a lot of explanations, but what Feynman pointed out, at least I think I learned it from Feynman, is I may not have any explanation, but I will ask the question, what is more plausible?
Right.
Given what I know about the universe, is it more plausible that those were aliens?
Like Matthew McConaughey and Jodie Foster.
Yeah. And then the point is, ultimately I'll say, given the laws of physics to understand them, almost any other explanation, as ridiculous as it sounds, is actually more plausible than the one that appears to be the obvious one. Mm-hmm. And so, when I as a scientist, when I think of many of the things you talk about, which are startling and amazing, I ask myself, well, it's weird. I can't explain that. But I don't necessarily need to try. I have to ask, if I accept it to be true, then what other implications does it have for what I know about the universe? And when it defies everything I know about the universe, not what we don't know, because there's a lot we don't know, but what's really important for people to know is there's a lot we do know.
Yes.
And if it conflicts with what we do know, then I become highly suspicious that there is some explanation that I don't understand.
Well, I feel like it can't possibly conflict with what we do know, because we know it. So how do you work it in? That's the thing.
No, but
it's like the requirement. You got to make it. How do you make it work? How do you figure out what is it?
Well,
I mean, it can't defy it.
Well, you could try and study it.
If we know.
But here's
certain
the problem.
Things.
But here's one of the problems.
Right.
Some of the things you discuss don't have falsifiability.
What do you mean? Okay.
Namely, I can't by there's no way to show that they're wrong. Let me give you some quotes from the book. Okay. Well, I hate to be so contrary.
I love it.
Okay. But it's useful for me because I think it talks about the nature of science.
I love it.
I love talking to you, so it's okay. Okay, so your mother explained, nothing works on everyone 100% of the time. Magic itself never works 100% of the time. And some people are highly resistant to outside influence. Either they're so fully preoccupied with ongoing static of their own thoughts and worries and to-do lists that there's no entry point, or they're dim-witted and their neurological system simply isn't equipped to receive our high-energy signals and instructions. So now, when you try something and it doesn't work, what does that mean? Well, now there's an out because it's the other person's fault. I can't prove.
I agree.
Okay, that one example. Let's go to another. Chaos magic. Okay, chaos magic. So basically, it demands you shapeshift. Here's how you do shapeshift. I love this description. Right. You know where I'm going, but I'm going to read it anyway. Because the audience doesn't yet. If what you're doing isn't working, do something else. And if that doesn't work, do something else again until something works. Right. So the point is, well, if I just keep not working and eventually it works.
See what sticks,
Okay.
Yeah, right. Noodles on the wall.
Let's try another one. You talk about, again, it's with Christopher and Valerie Harper in this case, and you said, doesn't always work. Sometimes they simply guess, and this invariably fails. But if I actually see the misplaced thing, it always works.
Well, that's true.
Well, the question is, how do I know when it doesn't work that you saw it but you don't remember seeing it? Okay. Well, okay, maybe that's too suspicious. But let me go to the last one. I've just picked a bunch.
But it happens. Okay,
but let me finish and then we'll go.
It happens with a greater frequency.
Oh, but here's the one that really surprised me the most.
Right.
Because and I think it has to do with Christopher and his illness or potential illness. Mm-hmm. And what is wonderful of the book is it's full of innate skepticism. I have 7 quotes from the book of where you're skeptical of yourself, and you have an ultimate moment of doubt.
Right.
In fact, there's this great moment of doubt where you say, it's a reminder that I am impulsive, destructive, prone to periods of paranoid, delusional, obsessively catastrophic thinking, and that I'm afraid of the unknown and all that I cannot control, and I've chosen to live according to the supernatural belief system indoctrinated in me by my severely mentally ill and benzodiazepine-addicted, narcissistic, and bipolar mother.
Exactly.
And you say, and it's this moment of self-doubt. Maybe this is, and of course, then what you later on show is that doubt was misplaced.
Right.
Okay, that doubt was misplaced. But what you say near the end of the book is, I won't always be right, but I will never doubt myself again. And that's the most disturbing thing to me, because if you don't doubt yourself, if you that implies some kind of level of certainty, then everything that happens has to be is explainable in terms, ultimately rationalized in terms of what you know to be true.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
And that's the problem with religion, right? Because you know it's true, and whatever happens, it always fits in because you know the answer before you ask the question. Mm-hmm. And that's
you're right. No, I think you're right. That's not the best wording.
Well, I mean, it's intriguing to me because if there's always those outs, then there's no way I can really test. See, I can try and explain something, but that's not, science isn't post facto explanation. That's storytelling.
Right.
Okay. What science is prediction. Mm-hmm. And prediction and testing.
Right.
What science can do is prove things to be wrong. It can't prove things to be right. And so if there's no experiment I can do to prove something to be wrong, and I can't test it, then it's not science. Mm-hmm. And so that's at the heart of this. And if there's always an out, well, really it was this. I mean, it's like the people. And,
totally get it.
And it's not with you, but it's with the charlatans who when I talk to, say, people like my friend Penn Jillette or the amazing Randy, who's on a life as a magician of showing people like these spoon benders or
right.
And they're always and mind readers. Mm-hmm. And they always say, oh, today, when you actually put them in a situation where you can do a really true double-blind test, it doesn't work, and they say, oh, but it never works when I'm in a room with doubters. You know, and you say, well, okay,
right.
And so I'm not,
totally
you're not
that.
I'm not putting you on that level. And so this is my concern. And it's an interesting one. So I can't, nor would I want to try and explain the amazing, remarkable things that have happened to you. I would just want to say that saying you'll never doubt it is not a good thing. It may give you the power. See, maybe you shouldn't doubt yourself, or at least you should. That's the important thing, is to say.
Exactly. That's why I said I think I agree. I've misworded that.
Yeah, because
I'm full of questioning myself constantly.
And it's clear when you read you are. That's what I find so frustrating, because you are innately questioning yourself. Throughout every book of yours I've read, you're questioning yourself. You're skeptical of yourself, and you're skeptical of others. Let me put it in a different context. There's an amazing story in and I think of course, in Running with Scissors, about Hope and her cat.
Okay. Oh God, right.
Okay, we're going to go to Hope and her cat. Now, want to put yourself in Hope's place.
Right.
Okay, so okay. Now, sorry, I feel awful.
Oh no, don't.
Okay, so I've got to get to the right book here. So let's go to Running with Scissors, and here we go. It's a great, and I got so frustrated when I read it because of what. Okay, so Hope woke up, and she woke me up 15 minutes ago. You say, and she said, I was dreaming of her, dreaming that she was eaten by a white glob. It was just awful, you guys. It was a nightmare, and all of a sudden I woke up, and there she was, curled up right next to me, her cat, purring. And we said, Hope, what are you talking about? Natalie laying a pillow over her head, covering her eyes. Don't you guys get it? Get what? I said. Get you finally gone completely insane? No, Freud was sending me a signal through my dreams. She was telling me she was dying. And then what did Hope do? She ultimately she knew that she was sensing that Freud was dying. She took Freud down to the basement, put him in a hamper, and lie with him for 4 days until he either starved to death or whatever. Right. And he died, validating her thing. Now, Now the question I have for you is, how would you? So Hope, here's the problem.
Right.
Hope knows the cat's going to die, and the cat dies. There's nothing you could possibly ever tell Hope.
She knows the cat's going to die, and then she takes it down.
But for her point of view,
from her point of view,
she said it was leukemia or whatever. But from her point of view, she knew the cat was going to die, and it died. There's nothing you can do, probably, that will convince her that.
No, right.
Okay. Let me give you another example that Carl Sagan used.
Okay.
It's a miracle at Lourdes. You know, at Lourdes, this cathedral in France.
Oh.
Okay. So all these people go into Lourdes, France, to bathe in the waters because of miracles, because the Virgin Mary produces miracles, you know, and people get cured from doing this. Now the Catholic Church actually keeps statistics on this, okay, and they try and see how many people got cured, and no one's ever gained an arm or a leg, right? But there are some people, for example, who've had cancer. They go in the Lourdes and they come out and their cancer goes into remission.
But aren't many medications, isn't the placebo effect in certain medications just exactly
It is. But
as
but in the case of Lourdes, it's even worse. This is the neat thing. The Catholic Church keeps the statistics. And they say, okay, how many people have been cured of cancer of the 120 million people who've gone to Lourdes, and it's like 23 or something. And you work out the ratio of people who've gone
is the same as people who would.
No, it's worse.
Oh,
it's worse.
So it's harmful.
But no, it's not. It's just an accident. But here's the point: if one of those people comes out of Lourdes and their cancer goes into spontaneous remission, there's no friggin' way that you're ever going to convince them that it wasn't a miracle. And there's no way I could.
Right.
Okay. And that's the problem with that I see with with this sort of non-falsifiability. Of course, things happen that I can't explain. I can't say why you go into remission from cancer. I can't. There are many reasons. But all I can say is, if I say it's a miracle, then what does it imply about the rest of the world? And when I look at the rest of the world, I say highly unlikely.
Right.
And I think that for me is the real issue here, is that I can't explain things I can't explain, and I love mysteries. I love not knowing. It's the best situation to be in. It's what scientists want to be in, and I suspect it's what you love. I mean, when you write to me, you said I love these. It's a fascinating mystery, and anyone who continues to be curious loves not knowing. But not knowing, not understanding, is not equivalent to ceding the existence of God, or the existence of UFO phenomena, or the existence of Hope's cat dying, and so, what would you say, not to yourself, but what could you say to Hope that would stop her believing that she had a dream, and look, the cat died? That's the situation I want to put yourself that I feel in to some extent when I'm talking to you. Although I don't put what's happened to you in the same way as Hope killing her cat in a hamper. I don't know if there's a resolution of this, but I just want to leave you with that thought. And
no, I totally get it.
And because
and it's something I've always I don't want to say struggled with, but what is it? It's like, what is it?
Well,
forget the word.
Yeah.
Forget the word.
Yeah.
Forget the
of course.
word.
I don't care which is. What is going on in the world? And aren't there strange things we don't understand? And of course, that's why I'm a physicist, because there's strange things happening out there we don't understand. And that I want to end on a positive note. I don't want to end on
there has to be. Okay, so like, was it? What year is it now? 2019, right?
I think 2019 is. I recall.
18. So 2017. We discovered, you scientists, the largest organ in the body, right? I don't remember the name of it.
Maybe.
Well, we did.
Okay.
So how long have we studied anatomy?
Okay, so there are new things to be discovered look, if you're going to tell me under our noses, there are new things to be discovered all the time. I do an episode of this podcast called Science Matters that point out how even in the most mundane things, there is amazing things to be discovered. There are, in fact, how do you put it in an
And here's the thing, I do not believe in any sort of predestiny.
No, okay, good.
I mean, I don't.
There's a quote at the beginning of Magical Thinking. I think it's Magical Thinking. One of your epigraphs, and not that one. Oh, maybe it isn't Magical Thinking. Maybe it's this book. It's Toil and Trouble. The world is full of magical things patiently waiting for our wits to grow sharper. I've actually used that in one of my books.
Such a gorgeous line.
It is. I've used that line in one of my books because it is.
Gorgeous.
The world is waiting for magical things to discover. I agree with you.
I know.
That's why
they
it's
just
important.
Can't conflict with what we know.
Well, yeah, but it shouldn't turn us off, and we shouldn't. And we should remain skeptical, but as you point out, we shouldn't have closed minds.
Right.
And so here's a quote near the end of your book, which I just think takes me back to the first book of yours I read, okay? And it says, "What I'm certain of is that there's something wonky going on beneath the surface of what we call reality. Things are most definitely not as they appear. Things are much, much more." And then I remembered a line from the end of Running with Scissors. Where Natalie says to you, "Don't you ever feel like we're chasing something bigger? I don't know, it's like something that only you and I can see, like we're running. And you said, "Yeah." I said, "We're running all right, running with scissors." Is, in a positive way, is this discussion of witchcraft just a continuation of now running with scissors, looking for the magical properties of the universe that maybe only you can see?
Oh no.
Oh no?
Oh no. I don't need to have any proprietary.
No, anything. I don't mean only you. I don't mean by you. What I'm saying is there not a connection between, what was wonderful about Running with Scissors? It was the life you lived was dysfunctional and tragic in so many ways, but the beauty of it was the freedom to discover and explore, and that's what she's talking about.
Right.
So there's something, the excitement that you both had, you and Natalie, that there's something bigger out there to yet discover. And I find a connection. That's why I find so heartening. Instead of the negative aspect, I find what's heartening about this book is it carries the same sense of wonder that there is something wonderful out there. And I share that with you, and I don't want to dismiss or belittle the wonder that comes in this book. So I guess I want to end by saying that the message I take from this book, in spite of my skepticism, is that the world is a wonderful, magical place, and we can work together to discover wonderful things. And there's a lot of neat stuff out there, even if it isn't the stuff we wanted. The world is the way it is, whether we like it or not. And you have made my world better by being here. And I want not just being here, but by everything you wrote. You keep running with those scissors. You keep running and finding a magical world, and I'll eat it up. And I am just so thankful that you're here.
Oh, I'm so grateful to be here.
And
I'm such a huge fan.
And
of your mind.
And vice versa.
I wish it's
so
going
much.
for hours and hours.
Well, I hope we have a chance, if not here in private, to go on for hours and hours. It was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. This podcast is produced by the Origins Project Foundation, a non-profit organization whose goal is to enrich your perspective of your place in the cosmos by providing access to the people who are driving the future of society in the 21st century and to the ideas that are changing our understanding of ourselves and our world. To learn more, please visit originsprojectfoundation.org.